And today, we're going to be looking in the book of Job at the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And so, if you think about this question and you've been reading the book of Job with us, you probably know who the good person is that we're talking about. And even from what we spoke about last week with Job chapter 1 of just Job and what he walked through, Job is this good person. So it's not hard to see where we're going when we ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And the reason that this question is pressing for us is that the typical kind of simplistic reductionist way that we approach this question of just all of the things that are happening is that we put it into a simple axiom, which is good things happen to good people, and the reverse of that, which would be the bad things happen to bad people. And so this is sort of the easy way for us to kind of come to grips with our world. Think of it like a modern version of karma. Like you see on social media sometimes kind of this instant karma, like the universe is exacting revenge, that bad things happen to bad people. So you would see like a clip like some girl is sneaking up and she's going to push her friend in the pool, but somehow she slips and she ends up one in the pool, right? Justice is served, like instant karma. So this is kind of a modern version of this idea of karma. Another version I hear of this kind of good things happen to good people is when I go golfing. Sometimes you'll see a guy who gets a good shot, and with that good shot you hear somebody say, you must be living right, because good things happen to good people. Now, good thing is, for me, this isn't a real temptation because I see so few good shots when I go golfing that I don't hear those kind of comments. But if I did, I'm sure somebody would say, you must be living right. And the reason that we like this kind of simplistic view of things is that it reflects our humanistic tendencies of we want to have everything in terms we can understand. Something we can control, something where we can set the terms of the engagement and make our world make sense to us. And, the idea would be like if I'm a good person, I keep my nose clean, I do the right things, then God owes me 2 kids in a nice house in suburbia because good things happen to good people. That's what it looks like. And if you think about bad people, those bad people, like somebody that smokes in the lobby with no smoking room. Like for those kind of bad people, bad things happen to bad people, right? And so we think of it in terms of justice like I think the justice served. So I want it in terms I can put my arms around and that I think reflects that bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people. Pastor and author Tim Keller, who's been very helpful as we've been doing this study, he has this to say about this phenomenon of kind of God owes me. He says this: most young American adults see God as a being whose job is to meet their needs. The implicit but strong cultural assumption of young adults is that God owes all of the most villainous people a comfortable life. This premise, however, inevitably leads to bitter disillusionment. The presumption of spiritual entitlement dooms its bearers to a life of confusion when things in life inevitably go wrong. You ever had this kind of confusion? This kind of thinking where you're expecting something that I am expecting God owes me, like this spiritual entitlement, where you're like, how can this happen to me, God? Well, I want to take these questions to the Word of God. I want to ask this question: why do bad things happen to good people? To the book of Job. And God has answers for us in His Word. And I want to look specifically at Job chapter 4. So if you have your Bibles, you can read along with me, beginning in verse 1 and then continuing on through verse 7 and 8. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, if one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? Yet who can keep from speaking? Remember who that was innocent never perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and the blast of his anger they are consumed. So, the book of Job, this is chapter 4. If you looked at the book of Job overall, chapters 1, 2, and 3 are basically us being introduced to Job and his character and then the tragedies that befall him, including, of course, the ones we looked at last week in chapter 1, where Satan attacked Job's family and his possessions. But then, in Job chapters 4 through 37, Job has this back and forth dialogue with his three friends, basically asking and having responses to this question of, what happened to Job? Why did this stuff happen to Job? And the three friends are Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And the question raised in our text today is actually from Eliphaz, and it's a pretty good representation of the arguments made pretty much through the entire section of back and forth between Job and his three friends. And the basic advice they give Job, the basic questioning that they're asking is this: those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. So, if you think about this word iniquity, basically what they're saying is if you sow sinful things, bad things, if you do iniquity, then you are going to reap trouble. That's how the world works. The way we would say it is, bad things happen to bad people. That's what they're telling Job. And there's some biblical merit to this thinking. So, we are fallen people. We have sinful actions, and sometimes because of those sins, we could experience these consequences of our sin. A couple of examples that you see in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 24:30. I passed by the field of a sluggard, and behold, it was overgrown with thorns. So the message there is, the lazy man suffers. This sinful laziness kind of has its work, and it's showing itself in the work of his hands. So there's some kind of a natural order of how we do works, and we receive something perhaps in return that's bad news. Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So if we're given to anger, sinful anger, then there's very possible that we end up receiving back some kind of negative kind of relationship, damage, anger being returned to us. And this is like the created order. It reflects God himself, who is just and good and kind. And so when we live by those principles, well, then that's a good, sustainable way for us to, engage life. But this overly simplistic thinking, you can take it too far. And let's think of it like this. If I say that good things are happening to me presently, then do I then assume that I'm a good person? Or the inverse. Think about Job. Job has bad things happening to him. So what does that tell us about Job? Well, Job must be a bad person. And the reason that we are so quick to kind of put things in this terms is because we want to be in control. We want to have answers. We want to have this kind of rules of engagement that we can wrap our arms around and engage, and it makes sense to us. And this kind of thinking takes many forms. Because it is such a temptation, we see it in many forms. One is, in its secular form, we would call it karma. Just like we talked about before, that this kind of the universe exacting justice in the way that we think that people should be judged for their bad action. In religious forms, it's moralism. So moralism is the idea that basically there's a standard that I think is right. There are things that I think you should do that are good, and I'm going to watch to make make sure you're upholding, you're doing the right things. And if not, then I've got this bar that I've set that I'm evaluating you against to pass or fail. And I'm keeping myself to that as well, but that's kind of this moralism idea. An example of moralism, it's an old saying, so I might date myself a little bit, but don't drink, smoke, or chew, or run with girls that do. Ever heard that one? Don't drink, smoke, chew, or run with girls that do. So, it's sort of this idea that I have this moral standard that says I'm not going to run with girls that drink, smoke, and chew. And, I can say I have never gone out with a girl that chewed tobacco. So I think I pretty well cleared Kim, never chewed tobacco, never had that problem. So I feel pretty good about keeping to that moral standard. But that's the kind of thinking where basically I'm saying we have this moralistic standard that I expect of you, and I'm watching to see, are we keeping this? A little closer to home. In Christian circles, we see this idea, and we call it legalism. Legalism is a word that is described by C.J. Mahaney this way: seeking to achieve forgiveness from God and justification before God through obedience to God. So you can see where legalism, like these other things, is basically me saying I want to set rules that if I do them, entitle me to good things with other people, with life, with God. If I do this work, I want the good things on the other end of the rainbow. That's the idea. But think about what we said from that quote from Tim Keller, where he said the presumption of spiritual entitlement dooms its bearers to a life of confusion when things inevitably go wrong. And so if we want to take this kind of simpleton approach to life, where everything is, in this good things happen to good people, and that's how I'm going to build my life, what we're seeing is that we are headed for disappointment, disillusionment, just like Job's three friends. But for Job, this bad things happen to bad people label, it just doesn't fit. For Job, he has something else going on in the background. And we all know, because we get a chance to hear the writer of the book of Job describe all the stuff going on in the background, right? We read in Job chapter 1 about how there was something going on in the background that Job's three friends didn't know about. We know about it. Job's friends surely didn't know about it. And it was that there was an enemy of Job, Satan, inflicting him on all of these things. We learned last week that Satan attacked Job's wealth, attacked Job's children. In chapter 2, if you continue to read, you'll see Job's health. Satan attacked Job's health. And it says in Job 2, verse 22, Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with sores. So you can see what's going on here is Satan is attacking this man Job. And so, unlike the assertion made by Job's friends, the evil that's come upon Job is unrelated, disproportionate to anything Job did or did not do. This is a whole different source of evil and suffering. And not only do we, as fallen people who are sinful and perhaps suffer consequences that are an experience of what we have done in our own fallen condition, we also see that we have a fallen world that we live in. Evil comes upon us like Satan in this fallen world that would bring evil upon us, just like Job. And this category of fallen world, I want to expand a little bit beyond just this work of Satan, because there's more to this. And when I say fallen world, this is kind of shorthand. Think of this as shorthand for the effects of the fall. When Adam and Eve sinned against God, that was their fall from grace, their fall before God, that led to many of the problems, the fallen condition that we find ourselves in today. And of course, that fall began with we have a relationship broken with God. That was step one, which is the first steps of all of the fallen things that we as people experience. We have broken relationships with other people. We have sinful habits that we can't break. This is all a byproduct of that brokenness between us and God. But then Genesis 3 takes that another step, and it talks about several other effects of the fall that affect this fallen world. Like, it says, cursed is the ground that you work. This is God speaking to Adam. And what that says is that now this ground that Adam's supposed to work is got these, where it was once, prosperous, lots of food, all of these good things. Now it's famine and lack. It's dangerous. This world itself has suffered because of the fall, this natural world. Secondly, for Eve, it says that Eve, in pain, you shall bring forth a children. So now childbirthing process, where it once was a joyful, pleasant experience, now the Word of God testifies that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be painful. This reflects that the natural body has now, it has disease, it has ultimately will die, it will break down and give way to death. This is part of the fall. And so if you put those together, what you have is not only do we suffer the attack of Satan, but we also have famine, earthquake, disease, COVID-19, famine. These are all different things that are effect of evil and suffering that's come upon us as a part of the fallen world that we live in. So this kind of helps us understand that sometimes it's not bad things happen to bad people at all. Sometimes it's a product of this fallen world that we are living in. And the answer to both is the same. The answer comes to us for both fallen people and the fallen world. God has an answer, and we see it in Job's response in Job chapter 19. And so if you want to turn there, Job chapter 19. So in this back and forth, I said we've got these many chapters of this kind of question and response between Job and his three friends. So Job gives his response in Job chapter 19, right in the middle of the book. And it's the answer for the entire story. And if we read it with a view to Christ, it's actually the answer for the entire story, the entire message of the Bible. Listen to this, Job chapter 19, beginning in verse 25. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. Job says that in spite of my circumstances, in spite of all of these things that the fallen world has brought upon me, the sufferings in my physical body, the evil that has come against me, the wrongs that have been done to me, I have a Redeemer who's mighty to save. And he can save over all of these tragedies that have come against me. And he says that I will see my Redeemer do this great work. Though I am weak, he will stand. Now I want to see and talk about two powerful aspects of this statement from Job. What an incredible statement that Job makes. I want to talk about two particular aspects. There's so much here that we can talk about, but I just want to pick out two of them for you today. The first is the power in the power of this Redeemer that we see on display. So notice that this Redeemer, it says here, he will stand upon the earth. Okay, this word here for earth, this is the Hebrew word that's typically translated in the Old Testament as dust. And so you see this word used repeatedly, this Hebrew word in the Old Testament, probably most famously in Genesis chapter 3, which is the passage we just referenced about the fall, where God says, from dust you came, and to dust you shall return. But this Redeemer, he will stand upon the dust, stand upon the earth. This Redeemer is over. He has conquered the grave. He has conquered sin and death, and his reign, his power, is eternal. It is a reign that will span past this life into the next, over the power of death, which he has conquered. Our Redeemer Christ has conquered. And so his power and authority being beyond the grave, he will bring justice and redemption that extends even beyond this life. Now, secondly, I want you to notice faith that Job expresses in this statement. So he says that I know my Redeemer lives. He says, I shall see this work of my Redeemer for myself. This is incredible confidence that Job has in what his Redeemer is going to do. And Job understands how faith works. Notice the timing of this work. It says, at the last. Job's looking ahead and saying there's going to be this work that the Redeemer is going to do. And it's going to be at the last. And so he's not expecting, I'm going to wake up tomorrow after this great prayer and everything's going to be fixed. I may be in the midst of suffering and tragedy and evil, but I know there will be a day that I have my hope set on, that I have confidence in, that my Redeemer will stand at the last. It's like Abraham, who God promised to make into a great nation. And when Abraham heard this promise, this is what the Bible testifies in Romans chapter 4. It says this of Abraham. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. He put his faith in, I believe in my Redeemer. Now Romans 4 goes on to expand on this idea of faith, saying this. Now to the one who works, the wages are not counted as a gift, but as his due. And to the one who does not work, but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted as righteousness. This is a helpful insight look under the hood of how does faith work. And this is very helpful for us, because as we're trying to understand, good things happen to good people, this is like another level of understanding for us where faith comes into play. So we know on step one that if we take this simpleton, karma, moralism, legalism kind of approach, like Job's three friends, then we're going to be more than just disillusioned that the things aren't going like I expect them to go, because that's just not how the world works. But even more critical and more damaging for us, we will miss the design of God, which calls us to faith in our Redeemer. So I just want you to imagine bringing before God this idea of good things happen to good people. Imagine bringing that before the throne of God and trying to tell God good things happen to good people, and I'm a good person. Why do you and I both know this is not going to end? This is not going to go like you hoped it would go if you try to take this thought all the way before the throne of God. And the reason is because ultimately all of us are bad. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so the fact is that if good things happen to good people, because none of us are good people, none of us deserve to have these good things happen to us. And the fact that they do is the sheer mercy of God given to us that we would experience His goodness. But Romans 4 describes to us, though, how it works. He says to the one who does not work, in other words, the one who does not hold this good things happen to good people requirement over God's head and says, you've got to do it like this, to the one who does not work, instead believes his faith is counted as righteousness. We believe in this Redeemer. I know my Redeemer lives. Faith in this powerful Martin Luther was a man who built his life around this idea of good things happen to good people. He was a great reformer, and he actually built his life saying this is what it is. And so he tried to justify himself before God as a righteous person. And he was so obsessed with this that he actually brought to the breaking point before God. His guilt of, I can't do it. It got so extreme that he ultimately just said, God, I don't know how you can be good and loving and treat, and this is how I feel like I'm being treated. But God revealed his grace to Martin Luther, and Luther went on to become the very spark of the Reformation based on this very truth, that the righteous will live by faith. And so Luther has this encouragement for us as we want to understand faith. And he says this: human beings, by nature, when they get near either danger or death itself, will of necessity view their own worthiness. We defend ourselves by all threats by recounting our good deeds and moral efforts. So when suffering comes, when we are in the midst of evil and suffering, what's the first reaction that we have? It is to go back to good things happening to good people. So why is this happening? And we want to try to pull out our spiritual resume, defend ourselves, to say, I have done all the right things. That's where we go. Even if it's not true, it's our first instinct is to go right back to this. But Luther gives us the cure. Luther continues, he says this: the troubled conscience has no cure for its desperation and feeling of unworthiness unless it takes hold of the forgiveness of sins by grace offered free of charge in Christ Jesus. The gospel teaches us that the foundation is not good things happen to good people. Our faith is in the power of God to redeem. That by his grace, he has redeemed us, and he has, by the precious blood of his Son, let his Son lead us to partake by his grace in this work of repentance. I know my Redeemer lives. In the midst of suffering, I want for us to receive this call just like we see from Job, that we would have faith in this powerful